Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today I have my full review of the Cold Steel Broken Skull. This is the new for 2016. Steve Austin was kind of involved in this in some way, and I'll speak to that in a second. Before I do, let me say two quick things. Number one, I was away for a few days and a bunch of comments were put on all these videos. I will try my best to respond to those comments where it's needed. If I don't get to your comment, it's not that I'm ignoring you. It's just that, you know, a lot have been made over the last few days. So I really will not be able to get to every single one and reply to them or dialogue on those various things that you guys have brought up. The other thing I want to say is before someone comments on this video, which I'm sure will happen if I don't say anything, the mark on my face is poison ivy. I was out in the bush for doing some camping and it was a lot of fun, but I was able to find some poison ivy that I didn't see ahead of time. And in fact, as I look back, I don't remember seeing any. So I'm not exactly sure where I encountered it. Anyway, that gives you an explanation before everyone's asking what's going on with the spot on your chin there. It's poison ivy, and I have it on a couple of other parts of my body. So that's sometimes what you get for not sitting around on the couch all day playing video games. Anyway, let's get back to what we want to talk about, which is this knife. And let me say this about this knife. This is very, very similar to a previous model called the Lone Star Hunter. Same size, same blade shape. This is obviously more modern. G10 and CTS XHP steel, better materials, lighter weight. So there's a lot of improvements on this knife, but because of the similarity, I kind of have doubts about how involved Steve Austin was with the actual design of the knife. I think it's more of a marketing partnership than anything else, and that's fine, okay? The reality is whoever they associate with it, and in fact, if they hadn't associated anyone with it, it is a very good knife. So that's sort of my introduction to it. The one thing I really, really like about this, and you guys, I've said this before in other videos, there are times where the amount of weight I can carry is restricted. Maybe I'm going jogging, maybe I'm going to the gym, maybe I'm walking the dog and I'm just wearing like a thin pair of workout pants or track pants. You can't put a big heavy knife in your pocket. You know, this is not going to work. And so having a large knife that's still extremely lightweight is really, really useful. Okay, and that is a really standout feature of this blade. It's incredibly lightweight for its size, and I have really appreciated that. In addition, it's very well built. So you're getting a lightweight knife that is still fairly strong and capable, with one exception that I'll speak to when we get to that portion of the discussion. All right, so there you go. Let's actually tell you what the size and weight on this is. It is 9 5/16 overall. 4 1/8 inch blade, and the handle on this is 5 5/16. Okay, so fairly large knife. You know, if you go over 9 inches on a folder, that's a big knife. Okay, and to come in at only 3.1 ounces is phenomenal. Right, that is very, very lightweight, and you'll see that in a second when I do some comparisons to this knife. It does really, really well on that. One last number that's worth noticing here: this is less than 3/8 of an inch thick, so it's just over 5/16. All right, extremely thin and lightweight to carry a very large knife. So that, in terms of efficiency, in terms of ease of carry and convenience, this is a real win, especially if you do something on a regular basis, some part of your regular daily routine involves a large knife, but you don't want to carry something really heavy. This is really, really good. Okay, so now that we've got size and weight out of the way, let's do some comparisons. This knife is, as I said, 3.1 ounces. Another Cold Steel that kind of comes to mind when we talk about a knife that's efficient and lightweight and fairly thin and easy to carry has got to be the American Lawman, and yet check out the size difference. This is obviously a much larger knife, even though it weighs more than half an ounce less. So this knife is like 3.9 ounces or something like that, and this is 3.1. Okay, very, very impressive. Not that I would, okay, let me say this, I'm not going to just go out and say this is a better knife than this. There are actually a lot of reasons I prefer the American Lawman over this, but the size and weight comparison is very, very good. Another knife well known to be very size and weight efficient is the Paramilitary 2 from Spyderco. Again, the Ultimate Hunter is way bigger and quite a bit lighter. Here you have about 3.8 ounces and again 3.1. Now to come to a knife that's actually, let's do one more fairly lightweight folder. Here's a SOG Trident Elite. Now you guys know about my issues with the arc lock. I've never seen one that functions properly. That said, this is designed to be a fairly large but lightweight clip point knife. And again, you compare these, not only is the Ultimate Hunter quite a bit, the Broken Skull, hopefully I haven't said the Ultimate Hunter any more times, but the Broken Skull is what we're talking about here. It's quite a bit larger and quite a bit lighter, almost a full ounce lighter than the SOG Trident Elite. Okay, now a couple of knives that are probably more similar in size. This is the Benchmade Crooked River. You can see it's close in size to the Broken Skull. All right, but quite a bit lighter. This is a good 5 ounces. Now, this knife is actually really light for what it is, and I'll speak to that in the separate review. But before we get to that, I've got a couple more cold steels that I want to compare because they're closer in size. So here is the Recon 1. Again, though, 5.1 ounces, or maybe 5.5 ounces. So you're getting it. Now, again, I'm not saying that this knife is better, it's just lighter. And you got to notice that it's impressive to have a knife of this size at that very light weight. One more comparison, and that is with the Swift. Okay, and the Swift kind of lands in the middle of, you know, you've got the American Lawman and the Recon 1, and the Swift is kind of in between those two. It's a fairly well, you know, sort of middle ground knife. Again, a very popular one. And that's how those two compare in terms of size. And again, the weight on this is around 5 ounces as well. It might be just under 5 ounces if I'm remembering correctly. So really, really efficient knife. Great knife if you are, you know, if you're a backpacker, a serious like lightweight backpacker, this is a great option. Even if you're, you know, you're doing something, you know, maybe you're fishing and you may want to, you know, skin out a trout or something that you catch, but you don't want to carry a large heavy knife with you. This is a great option. Maybe you just are very averse to heavy knives. Okay, some people, and I've had people comment on my videos where it's like, dude, if this is like 5 ounces, I'm not carrying it. So this is a great option if you're one of those people who's a real like weight Nazi, where you just can't deal with, you know, a 5 or 6 or 6.5 ounce knife in your pocket. This is so light, so thin, you literally don't even notice it. But man, when you pull it out and use it, you have a lot of capability. Okay, so let's get into the specifics. I'm going to zoom in here and we'll talk about the blade. I have a few things to say about that. Let me move out of the frame so we can just look at the knife. There we go. Okay, so there it is in close-up, the Cold Steel Broken Skull. You can see Broken Skull right there and Steve Austin underneath. On this side just says Cold Steel and CTS XHP. So this blade is a full flat ground blade. It's a clip point in CTS XHP. Very, very good steel. Going to perform exceptionally well for you. Now, I've said this before. My experience says to me that Cold Steel does not harden their CTS XHP as hard as, say, Spyderco, or as hard as, say, my Southern Talc, or a couple other knives that I've had in that steel. I think Cold Steel, the knives are just a little bit softer, and I think what that is an effort to make these a little more popular for the average user who's not extremely skilled at sharpening. You know, you get a really hard Rockwell hardness, and that's going to be difficult for the average user to sharpen, and so I think Cold Steel kind of tones it down a bit. Not that it's bad, not that I've had any poor performance. In fact, I've got a couple knives here that I took camping with me and used all weekend, and are still razor sharp. So great steel, pretty good blade shape. Now here's one of the things I'm going to complain about. Okay, kind of a tradition for Cold Steel with this knife, for example, and with a few others, is to have various blade shapes available. And I think this is a knife where I've heard some people say, you know, that knife is one I won't be buying just because I don't like clip points. Well, you know, you could leave this part the same, and you could offer, you know, a drop point or a spear point blade in this, and you may find that some people are more drawn to that blade shape. Now, the sharpened edge, I think because of the shape of this handle, you're kind of stuck with this particular edge profile. That's not going to be able to change a whole lot, but you could obviously, instead of having this clip here, you could make this go kind of straight down and just be sort of a traditional drop point, or even a standard straight back blade. So it would be neat to see some different blade profiles in this knife, and I think that might be sort of the thing that puts a couple people over the edge. The other thing is, this is a full flat grind, which, as I've said recently in my blade grind video, is not my favorite grind, but because this is fairly thin stock, we're talking about a fairly thin, lightweight knife, there's no issue with the flat grind here. This is going to perform like the flat grind on your Para 2 or your Military or your Mannix or your Rat 1 or any of those other nice thinly ground flat ground blades where they perform exceptionally well. Okay, and this is actually a blade that will do just about everything well. Okay, so if you don't like the aesthetics of it, you don't like the look of clip points, that's one thing. But I don't really think the blade shape on this, you can take anything away from its actual performance. Okay, very, very good performing blade. Now there is one issue, and that is if I turn the knife this way, notice this is very thin at the tip. This is one of the thinner knives that I've ever seen from Cold Steel. Certainly I would compare this to all the knives that we worry about. This is comparable to a Para 2. Okay, people often have talked about the very thin edge on the Para 2 or the Military or a few others. This is not a knife you're going to want to drop. Okay, you'll break that tip off very easily if you're not careful with it. Okay, so that's my discussion on the blade. I really like this blade, very useful, but it is a very thinly ground tip there that could obviously break off. What about lockup and deployment? Well, let me zoom out a little bit for this. I'll still stay in a little bit, but I'm going to come into frame. There we go. So what about lockup and deployment on this? It's triad lock. Okay, so with the triad lock, we know we're getting a ton of strength. It's a really, really strong, really, really durable lock. I would claim, and I think I can do this fairly safely, that this would be the strongest lock available in a folding knife. Most people would agree with me on that. In fact, I don't think there's a whole lot of debate about that. That doesn't mean it's the best lock going. It doesn't mean it's the only lock I care about or like. It doesn't mean a whole lot, because, like I've said a million times before, you must always use a folding knife as if it could fail. Okay, so you never put negative pressure on a blade of a folding knife the way you would do maybe with a Vicks blade. All right. That said, it is a very good lock, just not fast. I've tried. I'll demonstrate here for you and see if I can do it. I can flick it out, but it does require some wrist action. Okay. There you go. So you can deploy this knife quickly if needed, but you're gonna have to get used to it, and you're gonna have to give it a little bit of wrist flick like that to get it to open quickly for you. All right, it's typical lock back design. Okay, when you have a lock back, obviously that lock bar is putting pressure on the tang of the blade the whole time. Okay, so it's adding friction, and therefore the knife is not going to open as quickly as something like this, or even something like this, right? You can flick out a Benchmade fairly quickly and easily, and we're all familiar with that. Not so with any knife that has a triad lock, and therefore most Cold Steels are going to be a little slower to deploy or require just a little bit of a wrist flick to get them to go quickly. Other than that, very, very good. Okay, there have been people complaining, and this has always been the case with Cold Steel, that hey, that triad lock is really stiff. Okay, and it is. It's an extremely positive lockup. Let me say this. The people who are going to complain about that are people who, like me, go ahead and flip their knives out over and over again. You sit there watching TV and you're playing with your knife over, flipping it out and closing it. And, titanium frame locks are great for that because we can do it a million times. Even the compression lock on the Para 2 is a great knife to sort of flick while you're bored watching TV or reading a book or something. Cold Steel knives, they're designed to be opened and used, okay? Which is really, that's ultimately what you're looking for in a folding knife. So I can't really take points away for the fact that maybe Cold Steels are not quite as fun to play with, right? The knives are not really meant for that. All right, so That's lockup and deployment, very strong, very reliable, actually quite smooth, and I can deploy it quickly if I need to. What about the handle? The handle is one of those things that I'm sort of, I don't know, on the fence about. It's comfortable enough, but it is very thin, and as you guys know, a thin handle is going to be a little uncomfortable with really, really hard, like if you're really going to bear down on something, that thinness is going to be noticeable in your hand, but it's designed to be thin, so it's comfortable in pockets. So it's a sacrifice that you have to think about, and if you're willing to make that sacrifice, then great. Okay, if you're not, then there's lots of cold steels that are bigger, right? Then you could buy the Recon 1, or you could buy the Swift, or any number of other knives that have a larger, more comfortable handle. Okay, the handle is quite thin. There's not the jimping on the back, and there's no really deeply recessed finger choil here. That said, the grip on this knife is actually very, very positive. This is, I would compare this new cold steel texturing on their G10 to a Para 2 or any other Spyderco you may have. So we're all familiar with just how positive that grip really is. All right, and I wouldn't be at all concerned about having my hand slide up onto this blade. When you hold on to this, you're really, really locked in. The other thing I do like about it is the options that are available. You have enough space here that you can choke up and get your finger here for detailed work. In a standard saber grip, it's very comfortable, but you can even kind of choke down on this if you ever needed something where you need more reach, okay? You have that option as well. And you can sort of kind of put this like a pistol grip into your palm, and you've got a lot of extra reach on that. So very, very comfortable, or very comfortable for its size. Very well done. Good versatility on this grip. I have really no complaint. Now, there is no lanyard hole on this knife, so if you're a lanyard guy and that's a real issue for you, then that's just the way it is. The clip here is very well done. Okay, this is cold steel does not always get their clips right, but I think this one is pretty well done. I don't find myself having to, we've all done this trick where you I got to get my nail kind of under there and pull it out a little bit if I'm going to get this to go in my pocket. I don't find myself having to do that an awful lot with this knife. Overall, it works pretty well. Okay, so there you go. Oh, it is reversible to left side. Okay, just left and right, no tip down carry. And you guys know I'm not a fan of tip down carry. Anyway, so let me zoom out here a little bit so I can talk to you. Overall, I'm actually very impressed with this knife. You've got a ton of blade, really, really strong positive lock, very grippy, very utilitarian knife here. That beats out a lot of the other knives. I've told you before, I have some knives that I kind of just keep around because they're very lightweight. Well, and this was one of them, in fact. I really don't need to do that because this beats a lot of those in size, in lock strength, in overall performance, even in the quality of the materials. And so this can become sort of my very lightweight carry knife, and the others can either kind of spend more time in the knife drawer or maybe even go up for sale or trade. So there you go, guys. That's my take on the Cold Steel Broken Skull. Really, really well done. It's really cool to see this. Now, the one knife that I didn't have here that I need to kind of make reference to is the Spyderco Endura. I don't have an Endura in my collection anymore other than my titanium Damascus one, which didn't seem that comparable to this. But this knife is bigger than the Endura with a stronger lock. So it's kind of an Endura killer as far as I'm concerned. Now, I know there will be some Spyderco fans out there who just love the Endura, and I'm one of those people, okay? But this is a very, very good knife, and I think a worthwhile comparison to do, and I may try to figure out a way to borrow an Endura or something to do a comparison between those two knives. All right, that's my take on the Cold Steel Broken Skull. Highly recommended, and we will talk to you soon.